With us today in the studio are Dr. Olena Bagno Moldavsky, a research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Professor Zev Chanin, lecturer on political sciences at the Bar-Ilan and Ariel universities. Welcome.
It's all.
Olena, how bad is the crisis between the West and Russia with regard to the situation right now that is happening in Ukraine?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. At present, the West is trying. Russians were the first who escalated the situation by bringing their forces to the Crimea. And at present, we see that Western diplomats are trying to use all the pressures that they have, all the non-military means, to influence Russia's decision and try to force Russia to sit and talk to Ukrainians. Meanwhile, they withdraw their preparatory meetings for G8 that were supposed to be conducted in Sochi in summer. And there were also talks about reconsidering military cooperation between NATO and Russia, and all sorts of other diplomatic and economic sanctions that West is discussing in order to influence the situation.
Olena, with regard to the sanctions by the West with regard on Russia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warns U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, saying that hasty and reckless steps that could harm Russian-American relations are ill-advised. What can you tell us about that?
Well, he definitely has a point. First, we have to remember that all these sanctions are usually short-lived. And if we are talking about the international politics and not trying to focus what is the vision of Putin about the region, I would say that Putin still remembers the experience of the Georgian War. And at that time, he also knows that there's going to be the next president in the White House in the coming years, and Putin will still stay the same Putin in Russia, most probably. So he knows that every new president is trying to reset the relationship. So even if these sanctions, and we can still see that, that there is a high possibility that the sanctions will be imposed, especially we'll see it in the coming months. And on the 21st, when Russian Duma is going to decide whether to annex Crimea or not to annex Crimea, then we'll be wiser to talk about more about the possibility and probability of economic sanctions.
Even though Professor Chanin just talked about the dependency of European states on Russian economy?
Yes, I mean we have to divide, I think, between the long-term and short-term strategies and prospects, because sanctions will, even if they're imposed, they are usually short-lived. And in a couple of years, Russia can survive short-lived sanctions. And we also know that the West is very much interested in having Russia in the UN Security Council, and they also have very many undisputed, as I already said, very many undisputed points also in the Middle Eastern region. So there's too much interest, shared interest between Russia and the West in order to expect a major escalation or Cold War type scenario.
It's true. However,
Olena, what is your take on the situation with regard to the impact of this crisis on the Middle East?
Well, I think one of the most positive, if I can call it positive, ramifications of this situation would be on President Assad, because everything, when the attention is diverted to anything but Syria, then he is definitely earning points. And for Russians now, there is less interest to impose diplomatic pressure on Assad to sit and talk to his opposition. And also they would also receive a free hand in supplying more weapons to the Syrian regime if they decide to do that. So I think that President Assad is now the major winner of the whole thing.
Even though the assurances by Russia to the United States and the Western powers with regards to the chemical weapons, will Russia's assurances be suffice still for Syria?
I still believe that Russians are interested in getting rid of their chemical weapons in Syria, because this is not in their interest to allow Russia to keep it. But we're talking also about more conventional weapons, and also the very idea of them controlling a political figure in a region, and this political figure, if they keep him in power, and this is probably what's going to happen, that would definitely be a message to the West.
We don't have much time left. Give us a little bit your idea of what you can expect for the future.
for the future, I think this conflict will enter the next stage, and this stage will be who has the legitimate right over Crimea. As we know, the Ukrainian side decides that this referendum is illegitimate. The Russians, and the West as well, the Russians claim that it is legitimate. This is going to be voted in the Russian parliament next week. And once the next week vote is happening, then we'll probably have a Kosovo-style, but the reverse scenario in the UN, different sides trying to present who is right about recognizing the independent Crimea, or Crimea as part of the Russian Federation.